I am an old man now. My hands shake when I lift my tea, and my voice cracks when I speak too long. But some memories never fade, no matter how many winters pass. This is one of them. I was young then, barely 20, when the war swallowed Europe whole. My brother Jonathan and I were moving through the Netherlands in 1944, trying to reconnect with a small resistance contact after our unit scattered during a night raid. We were tired, dirty, and scared in that quiet way soldiers don't like to admit. Every shadow felt like a rifle barrel. Every footstep sounded too loud. It was Jonathan who was hit. The shot came from nowhere, sharp and final, like the crack of a breaking branch. He went down hard, clutching his shoulder, teeth clenched to keep from screaming. Blood soaked through his sleeve almost instantly. I dragged him into an alley, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the whole street could hear it. We couldn't go back. We couldn't go forward. And staying still meant death. That's when I saw the house. It looked ordinary, brick, narrow, quiet. The kind of place you'd pass without a second glance. I knocked once, softly, then again. No answer. I was about to pull Jonathan up and run when the door opened just a crack. A man's eye looked out, sharp, afraid, but kind. I don't remember everything I said, only that I begged, not for myself, but for my brother. They brought us inside. The Franks. I didn't know their names at first. We were rushed through the house, every step measured, every sound controlled. Then a bookshelf moved. I will never forget that moment. Behind it was a hidden room, small, dim, alive with fear and hope pressed together. Inside were Otto Frank, his wife Edith, their daughters Margot and Anne, and a few others hiding there. Anne, bright-eyed, curious even in fear, looked at us like we were characters stepping into a story she hadn't finished writing yet. They didn't have to help us. Harboring soldiers meant death. Harboring anyone meant death. But Jonathan was pale, barely conscious, his shoulder badly wounded. Without a word, Otto Frank nodded and let us stay. They cleaned the wound as best they could. Anne held the lamp while her mother worked, her hands steady despite the danger surrounding us. Jonathan squeezed my hand and whispered my name, and I told him he'd be all right, because that's what older brothers do. Even when they don't know if it's true, we stayed hidden for days, days of whispers, of listening to boots pass outside, of hunger and fear and strange, fragile moments of peace. Anne talked when she could, about dreams, about writing, about the world after the war. She spoke as if she knew there would be an after. I admired that. I still do. Eventually, the resistance helped us move on. Jonathan survived. He carried the scar for the rest of his life. We said goodbye quietly. No hugs, no promises, just looks that said more than words ever could. The war ended. Life went on. Years later, I learned what happened to the Frank family. That knowledge still sits heavy in my chest. When people ask me why I remember the war so clearly, I tell them it's because of moments like that. Not the fighting, not the medals, but a hidden room, a moving bookshelf, a wounded brother, and a young girl who believed in stories, even when the world was trying to erase her. That is how I remember them. That is how I remember her. I wish the story ended with survival. I wish I could tell you that courage was enough. After the war, life tried to return to something resembling normal. Jonathan healed, at least on the outside. He laughed again, married, worked, pretended the war had loosened its grip. But some nights I heard him pacing, the floorboards whispering under his steps, the past walking with him. It was years later when I learned the truth about the Franks. I was sitting at a small kitchen table, reading a paper with hands that suddenly felt too heavy to lift. The words were simple, too simple for what they meant. Discovered, deported, died in the camps. Anne Frank was dead. Her family was dead. I remember folding the paper carefully as if roughness might make it worse. Then I cried, quietly, deeply, the way grown men do when the sound itself feels like a betrayal. I thought of the hidden room, the bookshelf, Anne's voice in the dark, talking about the future like it was a promise instead of a hope. I told Jonathan that night. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat there staring at the wall. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely there. "They saved us," he said, "and we lived." That sentence haunted him. Jonathan carried guilt the way others carry medals, heavy, always present. He believed that by surviving, he had stolen something that belonged to someone braver, kinder, younger. I tried to tell him it wasn't true. I told him that the blame belonged to the Nazis, and only them. But guilt doesn't listen to reason. One morning, years later, I got the call. I won't describe the details. Some things don't need to be spoken aloud. All I will say is that the war claimed my brother long after the guns fell silent. It claimed him in his own mind, quietly, cruelly. I buried Jonathan with his scar hidden beneath his suit. No one else knew what it meant. I stood there, older than I felt I had the right to be, and wondered why I was still here when so many better people were not. Now, I am old. I tell this story not because it is easy, but because it is true. War does not end when treaties are signed. It lingers in memories, in guilt, in empty chairs at the table. Anne Frank believed in the goodness of people, even when the world gave her every reason not to. My brother couldn't forgive himself for surviving when she didn't, so I remember them both. I remember Anne in the hidden room, dreaming of a future she never got to see. And I remember Jonathan, my brother, who carried the weight of that loss until it broke him. As long as I am alive, their stories are not gone. And as long as they are remembered, neither of them truly disappears. I'm an old man now. My hands shake when I lift my tea, and my voice isn't what it used to be, but my memories, those never left. If you sit with me long enough, I'll tell you about the war. Not the kind you read about in books with arrows on maps, but the kind that lived in the mud and the cold, the kind that smelled like damp earth and fear. My name is Edward. I was barely 20 when the letter came. Jonathan and I were sitting at the kitchen table when the postman knocked. My mother knew before we even opened the envelopes. She pressed her lips together and nodded like she'd been expecting it all along. We were drafted together, brothers, same train, same uniforms that didn't quite fit. Jonathan tried to joke about it, said at least we wouldn't be alone. I laughed with him, but my stomach felt like a stone. They sent us to the trenches not long after, long scars in the earth, filled with mud and men. The rain never seemed to stop, and when it did, the ground stayed wet anyway. Rats ran along the walls like they owned the place. At night, we listened to shells scream overhead and prayed they wouldn't choose us. Jonathan was always beside me. He was my anchor. When my hand shook too badly to light a cigarette, he did it for me. When he couldn't sleep, I talked about home, the sound of cicadas in summer, the way our father used to whistle while fixing the fence. We clung to those memories like lifelines. As the days passed, we met others. Boys, really. Some younger than us, some older. all pretending to be braver than they felt. There was Thomas, who shared his rations even when he didn't have to. There was Henry, who could sketch faces in the dirt with a stick, capturing people we missed more clearly than photographs ever could. In that place, friendship wasn't optional. It was survival. Food and water became scarce. Some days our rations were so small they felt like a cruel joke. We learned how to ignore hunger, how to sip water slowly and pretend it was enough. Hunger changed people, made tempers short, made nights longer. Still, we shared what we had. A bite of bread passed hand to hand felt like a promise that we'd make it through another day. The war dragged on, stealing time from us piece by piece. We lost friends. One day, a man would be laughing beside you. The next day, his bunk would be empty. You learned not to ask questions. You learned to keep going. Then one day, it ended. No trumpet sounded for us. No grand announcement in the trenches. Just a strange, quiet feeling, like the world had taken a deep breath and didn't know how to exhale. We were told to pack up, to go home. I remember looking at Jonathan and not quite believing it. We were alive. Somehow, we were alive. Coming home was harder than I expected. The war didn't stay behind. It followed us into our dreams, into the quiet moments. But life has a stubborn way of growing back. I met my wife at a small dance hall. She laughed easily, and when she looked at me, she didn't see a soldier, just a man. Jonathan met his wife not long after. Double dates, shared dinners, children playing at our feet. We built families the way we'd built friendships in the trenches, carefully, gratefully. We both had children. I held my firstborn and thought about how close I'd come to never knowing that feeling. Jonathan used to watch his kids run around the yard and shake his head, smiling like he couldn't believe his luck. Now, when I look back, the war feels like another lifetime, but I tell my story so it won't fade. Not because it was glorious, but because it was real. Because two brothers went to war, stood in the mud together, and came home to build something better. And that, to me, is what mattered most.